the night tradition began to tremble. It didn't happen under bright lights or public scrutiny. It happened in the quiet hours, when corridors emptied and certainty felt thinner than usual. One night, a decision was made that sent a tremor through traditions thought to be immovable, soft enough to ignore at first, strong enough to change everything. To understand why this moment matters today, we must look at how tradition truly survives, not through rigidity, but through relevance. Empires fall not when traditions are challenged, but when they refuse to bend. And on this night, one sheik realized that honoring the past did not mean freezing it in place. The evening began as routine. A closed session with senior elders, convened to review ceremonial reforms proposed months earlier and quietly delayed ever since. The agenda was conservative by design, meant to reassure rather than disrupt. Most expected a brief discussion followed by postponement. Tradition, after all, had learned how to outweigh change. But as the conversation unfolded, he sensed a growing disconnect. The elders spoke of continuity, symbolism, and legacy. He listened carefully, respecting the weight of their words. Yet beneath their certainty, he felt hesitation, an unspoken awareness that the world outside their walls had already moved on. When his turn came to speak, he did not argue. He asked a question. What happens, he asked, when the rituals meant to unite us begin to distance us from the people we serve? The room fell silent. It was not a challenge. It was an invitation. An invitation to examine whether tradition still reflected purpose or merely habit. Some elders shifted uneasily. Others avoided his gaze. No one answered immediately, because the question carried a truth none of them were prepared to confront. That was the first tremor. As the discussion continued, he introduced a proposal long considered unthinkable, adapting a cornerstone ceremony to reflect the realities of the present generation, not abolishing it, not disrespecting it, but reshaping it so its meaning could be understood beyond palace walls. The suggestion landed softly, but its implication was seismic. Tradition had not been attacked. It had been asked to evolve. And in that quiet chamber, on that unassuming night, the ground beneath centuries of certainty began to shift. The elders' response was measured, but the tension was unmistakable. They spoke carefully, choosing words steeped in caution. Tradition, they reminded him, was not designed for convenience. It existed to anchor identity, to preserve continuity in a world prone to forgetting. Altering it, even with respect, risked weakening the very symbols that held the nation together. He listened without interruption, understanding the weight of their concern. These were not obstacles motivated by pride. They were guardians shaped by decades of preserving stability through sameness. Yet he also understood something they could not yet admit. Symbols lose strength when they stop reflecting lived reality. The discussion deepened as he explained the proposal in detail. The ceremony would remain intact in structure, but its language would change. Its messaging would shift from exclusivity to inclusion. Its presence would extend beyond palace gates, allowing people to witness, understand, and participate in its meaning. It was not reform for novelty's sake. It was reform for relevance. The conflict surfaced when one elder voiced what others felt but avoided saying. If they altered the ceremony now, where would it end? What would stop future leaders from dismantling tradition entirely under the banner of progress? The question hung heavily in the room. He answered calmly. The boundary, he said, was intention. Tradition should be preserved when it strengthens connection, and questioned when it creates distance. Change guided by purpose was not erosion. It was stewardship. The debate stretched late into the night. Some elders grew defensive, others thoughtful. A few remained silent, their expressions revealing internal conflict. The tremor he had triggered was no longer subtle. It was moving through each of them, unsettling assumptions built over generations. Outside the chamber, word began to spread. Staff whispered. Advisors sensed a shift. No decision had been announced, yet everyone felt it. The unspoken understanding that something rare was unfolding. Tradition was being examined from within, not attacked from outside. As the session neared its end, no consensus had been reached. The elders requested time, reflection, distance. He agreed, knowing that pressure would only harden resistance. But as they rose to leave, one elder paused beside him and spoke quietly, almost to herself. If tradition cannot breathe, She said, "It will eventually suffocate us all." That sentence lingered after the room emptied. The tremble had reached its core, and what followed would test whether tradition could adapt without breaking, or whether fear would force it to stand still in a world already moving forward. The days that followed were marked by a rare stillness. No announcements, no clarifications, just an absence of certainty that unsettled everyone who depended on tradition's predictability. The elders retreated into deliberation, and the palace held its breath. Silence, once a sign of control, now felt like hesitation. He understood what was happening beneath the surface. Tradition was not resisting change. It was negotiating with fear. Fear of appearing weak. Fear of losing authority. Fear that once one ritual shifted, the illusion of permanence would fracture. And illusions, he knew, were often the most fragile structures of all. Whispers reached him quietly. Some elders feared public reaction more than philosophical consequence. Others worried that inclusion would dilute reverence. A few, however, had begun to question something deeper, whether the ceremony still honored its original purpose or merely repeated its form. The tremor had become internal. The conflict sharpened when a draft statement leaked, one that framed the proposal as a concession to modern pressure rather than an intentional evolution. The wording was careful, defensive, and designed to protect tradition by minimizing the change. When he read it, he felt the danger immediately. If the reform appeared apologetic, it would invite criticism from both sides. Tradition would look weak, and progress would look cosmetic. He requested another closed session. This time, he spoke with greater clarity. He reminded them that the ceremony was born in a moment of transformation, not stability. That it was originally created to unify people during uncertainty, not to shield authority from scrutiny. And he asked a question that reframed everything. If our ancestors created this ritual to guide change, why do we now use it to avoid change? The room reacted differently than before. Some elders shifted forward. Others nodded slowly. A few who had been silent found their voices, admitting they had struggled to explain the ceremony's meaning to younger generations. The realization settled that preservation without understanding had hollowed something sacred. Resistance did not vanish, but it softened. The turning point came when the eldest among them spoke. She did not argue. She reflected. She recalled the first time she witnessed a ceremony as a child, when it felt alive, purposeful, connective. Over time, she said, it had become precise but distant, revered but unreachable. And without realizing it, they had mistaken stillness for strength. Her words landed heavily. What was at stake was no longer reform. It was honesty. The elders requested one final night to decide. And as he left the chamber, he knew that tradition was no longer trembling because of him. It was trembling because it recognized itself in the mirror he had placed before it. The decision was delivered at dawn, without ceremony or announcement. He was summoned to the chamber where tradition had been guarded for generations. The elders stood together, not divided, not triumphant, changed. Their expressions carried the weight of a choice that could not be undone. They had agreed, not unanimously, but deliberately, the ceremony would evolve. The climax did not arrive with celebration, but with resolve. They would preserve the structure, the symbols, the lineage, but they would open its meaning. The language would be reshaped, the message clarified. The ritual would no longer belong only to those inside the palace, but to the people whose history it claimed to represent. One elder spoke plainly. Tradition, she said, was never meant to protect power from people. It was meant to connect power to responsibility. And when that connection weakens, tradition must remember why it was created. The shift rippled outward immediately. Some praised the decision as overdue. Others criticized it as dangerous. But something unmistakable had changed. Tradition had proven it could move without collapsing. And in doing so, it regained the strength no rigidity could offer. The first reimagined ceremony took place weeks later. It was quieter than before, less distant, more deliberate. People listened, not out of obligation, but recognition. The ritual felt alive again, not because it was new, but because it was understood. The resolution unfolded slowly. Tension faded. Skepticism softened. Younger generations began engaging with tradition rather than rejecting it. Elders discovered that reverence did not diminish when meaning expanded, it deepened. That night, standing alone once more, he reflected on what had truly happened. He had not broken tradition. He had returned it to motion. He had reminded it that survival was not about standing still, but about remaining necessary. And in that realization, he understood something lasting. Tradition does not tremble because it is weak. It trembles when it is finally asked to live again. So what do you think? Are we repeating the same mistake again? The